Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
G'day, how you going? Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, and we're going to get smack bang into 'tis the season for Q&As, I think it should be. I want to start concentrating a lot on the listener feedback that we're getting on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au and answer some of your questions on air. And we're going to be doing more of this also moving forward. We're actually getting a new, I'll call it a Ujima Flip, a widget thing that's going to allow you to send your questions in via audio so we can play them out on air and get them answered for you. So lots of stuff happening. It's going to be big for 2020, but I wanted to get into a question today, which is going to be a reasonably long answer because I've got a bit of experience in this and I've had this experience myself. So I'm happy to share that along with my guest in the studio, Paul Glossop, Director of Pure Property Investment. We're going to do this Q&A, so I hope you do enjoy. Remember, if you've got any questions, editor at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, you can write in. This question, it come in over October from Chris Graham. Chris, thanks for writing in. Do appreciate it. Chris writes, hey guys, absolutely love your show. Just wondering if you could possibly do a podcast on how to renovate a home when you live in another state. I'm going to do it shortly, and I feel like I could have just been taken for a ride being so distant from the house. Some tips and rules of thumbs would be great to hear. Thanks, guys. Chris, I know your pain. I've been there. I've done a number of interstate renos. My view is that it's so much easier doing it when it's close by, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking interstate. Paul, you must get this question all the time, similar sort of stuff.
All the time, and we do it all the time. Right now, we've got, I think, 11 or 12 renovations underway for clients as we speak in 3 different states. So to put it bluntly, we do it in a way that we need to make sure that not only are we experienced in it, but we also understand that every single state or city is going to have nuances as far as what the rates of certain tradie services actually are. So to answer that question probably in the most simple way, within my business at Pure Property Investment, our team have standard operating procedures for every state, for every single renovation that we would otherwise carry out, and what the average price for a 3-bedroom redoing timber floors, redoing carpets, light fixtures, fittings, blinds, paint internal, paint external, you literally name it, we've got a standard operating procedure for it because we go through this on a daily basis and we know exactly what it should cost, as well as how to arrange it and how to make sure you're shortening the time to do it, as well as maximizing the actual quality control of it. But long and short, if you're doing it yourself, interstate, without any knowledge and relying on your property manager, I can guarantee you that you are going to get a subpar job and there's going to be something that'll come up that's cost you more money and taken more time.
That doesn't sound very nice.
Not at all. And it is something that shouldn't be taken lightly because you can most certainly get taken for a ride, and that's something that we're extremely staunch on, is that we're going after a renovation job, that we know exactly how to arrange it, who to coordinate with, what it should cost and how long it should take.
So Chris has framed his question mainly around the negatives of doing it interstate rather than the positives of doing it interstate. Yeah. And we'll tackle that in a moment, but he's worried about getting ripped off.
Yeah.
Is what his question is. He's worried about getting taken for a ride. And I've heard these stories of people getting done in the past. And even doing a reno next door to where you live is a hassle, right?
Massively.
You know, it's the whole process of arranging trades, getting quotes, delivering it, executing it, project management. It is an absolute nightmare. You mentioned, so did you do this for your clients? It's just how you help them?
Absolutely, we do it for our clients. Yeah. We don't charge for it because part of this is the service that we need to provide to get an outcome, not just on the purchase price. If we're buying a property we know is 30K below market value, but we know needs 6 to 8K tipped into it, you've got to then factor in how long is that property going to be vacant for? How are we going to then arrange to get a tenant in? Who coordinates all these trades? And someone pays us for a service as a buyer's agency. We are a full service buyer's agency. And part of that is not just winging it. Part of that is knowing we engage this carpet layer, we engage this plumber, we engage this tiler, we engage this handyman, and we know exactly what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. We get quotes before we start. We compare those quotes to what it should cost. We also arrange with property management to get access at the exact right times, then re-advertise the property once we know it's close enough to getting photos, then getting prospective tenants through. They're the things in the background which literally takes a team of people almost a full-time basis on a daily outcome to say this is how you get the outcome by making sure you save money, get it done efficiently, and get it done the right way.
So you're getting economies of scale because you find yourself some quality suppliers and quality tradies, and then you use them all the time, and pretty much you probably just feed them all their work, right?
Absolutely. And they're not just fed work because they're going to do it. They're fed work because we've tried and failed with numerous others before we actually use them for our clients. I personally do a lot of renovations on my own portfolio. My buyers agents team have well over a couple of dozen properties in portfolios in areas we're buying in, and they've renovated numerous times over themselves. So we go through that trial and error to say, once we understand how to do it, what it should cost, how long it should take, then we try to implement that process with those same service providers.
So in order to renovate effectively outside of your home state, you got to get the right property that's renovation potential, but I think we're going to have to cover that at different time.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the mechanics. So you bought a place, you're going to renovate it, and you're renovating it for a reason. That would be to either increase its capital value or to make it more rentable, right? So let's just assume we're there, and I think we'll cover that stuff another time. So you got to find, the first step is to actually understand how much you need to renovate and why you're renovating.
Exactly.
So if you're renovating interstate, how do you work out what to do?
Yeah. So the first thing we've got to figure out is, what's the objective? If you're holding this property for 10, 15, 20 years plus, and it's got, some sort of intention to say it's a buy and hold, then for us, first and foremost, if we're trying to increase value, it's very, very difficult in this lending environment to go and do a renovation or a lipstick on a pig, for lack of a better term, to then say the bank or the valuer is going to come back and say, sure, the property's worth 50 grand more than what you paid for it because you painted the walls and put some new light fixtures in. It just doesn't go that way anymore. So the reality is, if someone wants to increase value, a renovation, unless you're going full scale extension or gutting out, it's very hard to figure out how to add value. So if the intention is to add value, we're usually probably a little bit apprehensive to say that's a bona fide strategy in this current market in any state right now. But if we're looking to either A, increase rentability, or B, increase rent value, and ideally both, that's when we just try to say, look, our job is to pare it back to the bare minimums, rather than say, yeah, it could do with a full renovation. Most houses in this country could do with a full renovation. And that's the way people need to treat it, saying, what is going to get me more rent and a tenant for a longer period of time at the least amount of money that I have to spend in the quickest time possible? That's kind of where we always start every discussion, and then go through that to say, what is a bare minimum? Quote up the bare minimum, get it done in a way that's going to be reliable at the correct price, as well as coordinate access and coordinate the property to be back on the market for rent as soon as possible. That's pretty much the sort of top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel.
Okay, and we've just gone through that really quickly, and we're pressed for time today on this, so we'll cover that again in another podcast. Let's make a note of that so we can get back to it. How do you find a good tradie?
Yeah, look,
do they exist in Australia anymore? All the good tradies are probably busy doing other stuff. So if you can find a tradie who's available to work now, are they a good tradie?
Well, it is funny because the tradies that we have for most of these jobs, they're typically unassociated with a big company because A, they don't come with a huge premium. So price is always important. But when it comes down to price, you're not trying to make it as cheap as possible, because typically we know that also ends up in a property that's going to get a very subpar job. Yeah. We find that the best tradies that we're working with are tradies who have worked in bigger companies or run a bigger company or work for something that's going to be a bigger scale, and comes back to saying that they're usually in their late 30s to 40s, potentially 50s, and also at the point in life where they're not wanting to take on a huge amount of work, happy to work for themselves, don't want a team of people, but also have experience and skills in a multifaceted approach. So they've done things before. They're people who are happy to work for you exclusively because they kind of made that decision that they're a one-man band for that reason. But in that same light, they've worked 10, 20 years in their profession. So they have the skills and the knowledge to say, in this situation, here's what I do. And I'm not going to rip you off because I know you've got another job coming for me. So I want to make sure that this is consistent work, as well as I want the outcome to be consistent, because I don't want you to look at that and all of a sudden the feedback comes and saying that was a really subpar job, we're never using you again. So it's people who have the reliability, experience, but also price to say that we're not looking in the Yellow Pages or Gumtree or some sort of massive website that they've spent 30 grand on an SEO to say, here's what people should do for me. Because if that's the tradie, they're not our tradie, because you can find anyone in any field, but it doesn't mean you're going to get the best price or the best outcome.
So the question I'm going to ask you, but when we come back from the break, is how do you know whether you're getting ripped off? Back in a moment.
If you're a regular listener to the Smart Property Investment Show, then odds are you're already a property fanatic who loves hearing stories on investing from real people, the good, the bad and the ugly. Be with people just like you and join the group Passionate Property Investors on Facebook now. Become part of a community who know what to do and when to do it. And the time to do it is now. Passionate Property Investors. Tribe, tools and tips. Find us on Facebook today.
Welcome back, everyone. We're chatting interstate renovations and how to find a great tradie. And we're fortunate in Australia, the tradies are the backbone of this nation. We all love a tradie. And my experience, to get the best out of a tradie, you need to think, feel and act and behave like a tradie. And, I've got a lot of mates who are tradies. You've got a lot of mates who are tradies. Yep. So you know how tradies are wired, right? Yep. There's particularly ways to get the best out of the tradies and there's ways to get the worst out of the tradies, right? And we'll get to this ripped off question in a moment, but this is important because if you get a good tradie, you got to look after your tradie, right? And for me, it's as simple as dropping off a case of beer on a Friday afternoon. It costs you $50, mate. You'll have the most loyal tradie in the world that'll always look after you just by doing little things or some coffees and bacon egg rolls in the morning or you know, being there on time, you know, all this really simple stuff. What's your number one trick for getting the best out of tradie other than paying their invoice on time?
Well, you probably just hit the first one there is that, I mean, as much as you can say that the way to a tradie's hearts are either through their liquor or through their bacon and egg roll, I think they're probably a little bit more sophisticated than we give them credit for.
They are.
But that being said, I think the things that you can do is that you don't scrutinise. If you've got a good tradie, and we know that we've got the tradies that rely on, they don't give us a quote and we don't nickel and dime them on the quote because they give us a quote saying, here's what it's going to cost. We don't go back to them saying, can you do it 20% cheaper? Because if they're going to do it 20% cheaper in the first place, or they could do it 20% cheaper, they're not my tradie because I know they're not giving me the best price that's also going to make them a small profit. They need to make money. So firstly, we need to make sure that we know that the quotes they're giving us for the work is the correct quote. We don't budge them because we know that we want them to get paid to do a good job. And secondly, to your point, and this is as simple as this, you pay them within their invoice terms. And keep doing it over and over and over. Don't nickel and dime them, pay them on their actual price, but know what it should cost. So I would say get numerous quotes. If it's somewhere in that budget range that it should be for a paint of a 3-bedroom house internally or for the retiling and repointing of some roof tiles, if you've got a few quotes and it's somewhere in between that, the easiest way you can do is get 2 or 3 quotes from 2 or 3 independent tradies, not aligned by your property manager. Make sure you do that because your property manager will know that if they get some ranges, they'll know the one that they want to position and they'll tell the tradie, just quote it at this and you'll get the job. Get them independent. And try not to have anyone else as part of that. And our role is when we coordinate it is we don't go through our property managers. We get the quotes directly through our tradies ourselves.
I completely get with you. This whole, you know, nickel and diming, penny pinching with the tradie, you know, if you want to be transactional and have a relationship once that you get a job done and you never see someone again, you can probably get away with that. But, you know, then it's going to come down to the quality of the job. But this whole question around how do you know whether you're getting ripped off? I think it's getting ripped off is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah, so, you know, if you go into any particular tradie scenario thinking that if I don't get the cheapest price possible, I'm getting ripped off, you're going to get ripped off.
Absolutely.
You're not going to pay a lot, but you're probably going to have to do the job twice.
As the saying goes, a tight ass pays twice. And that is the reason. You pay once on the ingoing and then you realise it was a subpar job and then you'll pay the proper price the next time round and you've ended up paying probably more.
I've actually had that experience renovating up in Queensland where we got some work done to make something more rentable and cover off a couple of what I deemed to be OH&S issues, right? Where, you know, as a duty of care, as a buyer's agent, I think the railings I thought were too low and they actually had vertical slats on it. And I went, well, kids are going to be there. That's not cool, right? So we went and redid all that stuff. And the work by and large was okay, but there was like some fundamental bad work done, which means that I then got some rainwater issues, which the whole ceiling came down as a result of it and had to redo the work all again. So I've been there, you know. And the trader that did, I think, was one of these bit of a, he wouldn't return our calls.
Let's
put it that way.
Yeah, it's pretty simple when they don't get back to you. And that's probably partly where you find...
So was I ripped off?
100% you were. Well, you ripped yourself off.
I think
you ripped yourself off because you were essentially saying, give me the cheapest quote and someone who can do it tomorrow.
I don't think it was the cheapest, but it was I need it done now.
Well, that's it. And as the saying goes, and I'll probably get this wrong, but you can get a job done fast, quality and cheap. So you can pick 2 of the 3.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes down to is that out of those 3, you always have to sacrifice one of them.
Yeah, it'll be fast and it'll be good quality, but you'll pay for it.
Correct.
It'll be cheap, it'll be fast, it'll be crap.
Yep.
Et cetera.
You get it. And it's such a good way to think about when you're going to do renovations is that they're the 3 things considered. So you can get it done quick, you can get it done cheap, and you can get quality. But you can't get all 3 at the same time.
You've got to choose 2.
So you've got to choose 2 out of the 3.
Yeah.
Yep. And you'll always sacrifice one. And that is very much, and any tradie listening will know full well that they'll overquote a job. And if they know they're getting paid well, they'll take their time and they'll do a really good outcome. Or they can say, I might do it really, really quickly and I'll do a good quality job, but I'm going to charge you for it. So I'm going to get a few extra tradies in to help me to get this done quickly and make sure we do a really good quality job of it. It goes over and over.
And I'm conscious a lot of tradies listen to the show because a lot of tradies are property investors, right? Because there's a huge advantage.
We've got a huge amount of tradies who are clients of ours.
Yeah, and we're talking about how to make sure you don't get ripped off by tradies. And I'm conscious that that's not a good way to frame tradies either. You know, and I just want to touch on this quickly because, you know, if you're not a tradie, most people think tradies are out there to rip you off, right? And they're not.
No, you know, absolutely not.
The tradies I know are highly passionate. They're very capable. They're craftsmen.
Absolutely. Right? And they're the ones you've got to seek.
They're the ones you've got to find. What we're talking about here is that very small group of tradies that maybe don't represent all that's great about being tradies. and they're few and far between.
Yeah.
You know, most tradies I know do an exceptionally good job. So we're just covering one bit on this, and which is how do you make sure you're not getting ripped off? So those three things probably a good guide to help you work that out.
Agreed.
Don't chase the cheapest price possible. You know,
Yep.
that's probably a good way to stop getting ripped off. But how do you know whether or not they're a good tradie though? Like, what's some base things? They're licensed, they've got insurance, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, those are the aspects that they're always they're non-negotiables, license and insurance, as well as they'll provide, and typically they'll provide some sort of understanding of what they've done in the past. And it goes back to when we look at some of the tradies that we have in our books, is they've typically had 10 years in that trade or that field. They've worked on larger scale jobs, they've worked on smaller scale jobs. They've typically run a business that might have been a bit larger at certain points in time, but they've scaled it back to say, I want to work on my pace and do good quality jobs that I'm going to be responsible for me personally. So usually I want to make sure that they're not fresh out of the books of being an apprentice and just trying to chase any work they can. They've got some experience in different situations, as well as if they need help, they've usually got one or two other tradies in that field that they can get in if it's a bit of a larger job or if you need it done quicker. If I touch further on that, once you realize you're not getting ripped off or you're getting the right outcome and the quality and the timing, the other thing that I want to make sure that everyone's aware of when you are thinking about buying an asset or an investment and you're renovating is making sure that there is an ROI. And the ROI isn't always going to be a capital appreciation based on twofold what you spend or threefold what you spend, because
there's no metrics.
There is no metrics there. And really, it's all very subjective, because the reality is banks aren't going to overvalue what you've done.
Other people argue against that. And I speak to a lot of people who say, no, for every dollar spent, you need to get $3.176 back in return.
And there's people who have
I'm not
businesses.
having a position on this.
No, I get you. And I've had discussions numerous times about this, and I've done plenty of renovations in my own portfolio, full construction, subdivisions, granny flats, townhouse developments, the works. And I've done them over and over, and I still am doing them. But when it comes down to it, if you're looking at buying a property that you're not buying as a dilapidated house that you're trying to increase the value of, and you're buying it for the purpose of a long-term buy and hold, if you're renovating a property straight up and you're planning to hold it for the next 10, 20 years, look, I've got news for everyone, is that in 10, 20 years' time, that renovation has to be redone. So the reality is, unless you're really 100% positive that you're going to be able to renovate within 3 months, extract equity from a bank valuation that's going to release equity for you to then replenish, that is a subjective and very risky position in my own opinion, as opposed to saying buy it, get the position of getting a good tenant in place or doing a renovation that's cost effective, rent effective, and then play the game of buying the property at the correct time in the cycle, let the land do its appreciation and everything else comes into play.
I'm happy you said that, because a lot of it is market timing. So, you know, this whole mechanisms of a return on investment for every dollar spent. I look at some of the renos we've done, and the return on investment is more than 3 times. It's like ridiculous times, right? But a lot of that is because of the nature of the market, the timing of the market. So, and I think of a property we did, I think you might have even visited once upon Cambridge Park.
Cambridge Park, I remember. Yeah, absolutely.
Go and check it out, Smart Property Investment. We bought it around this time,
2013, 14?
Maybe even earlier than that. Anyway, so the bank would only lend on the land value because they deemed the house uninhabitable.
Correct.
Once I swept all the syringes out of it and all that.
I'm pretty sure I inhaled a couple of buckets full of asbestos
probably.
as part of it. Far out.
But so we did a reno on that. I think it cost us 40. It's all on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Go and check it out with videos and everything. We did a great job. I think we'd spent $46,000 on a full renovation.
I remember you told me that at the time, and I thought, wow, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
For what this was the best part of a decade.
Yeah, it was. We bought it for 236, and now that's valued up at 600.
And it valued up at the time of 450
or 450. We doubled, essentially doubled.
Yep.
So we bought it well, and we got that through the buyer's agent that I continue to use. The guys at Right Property Group. It was a really good buy. You know, it was a really good buy. But that reno, you know, did that contribute to its doubling value in 5 years? Maybe a bit.
Yeah.
You know, I could have done that renovation a little bit later, but the house still was a good product, right? Because it was, you know, it was bought well.
Yeah.
So that renovation, I got, I don't know how many times the money back, right?
Yep.
But as the market did it, the renovation just sort of helped.
Absolutely.
How do you work that out? Like, how do you make sure the timing's right versus, because a lot of times the question would be, if you're renovating interstate, is don't renovate.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to. Just leave it as it is.
And I'm still a big proponent in that, because here's the question that you've got to always ask yourself is that $46,000, here's my other question too, at that time, if you bought a property that was maybe, let's say $30,000 more expensive than that and was habitable as is and did nothing to it and just put a tenant in place and took that same $46,000 and put it into another deposit.
So if I bought the house next door.
In that same market and that doubled in that 6 or 7 years, then you ask yourself the question, did you get a return on investment of your 46 grand that actually gave you another 46, maybe even 60, 80 odd grand in doubling, or did that leverage you into another $300,000 property, which is now worth $600,000? So that's the big question that I always have to pose as well, is that you can't borrow that money. You must have liquidity, whether it's equity or cash. And that's the question you've also got to ask yourself, is it worth investing another 50 grand, or is it going to be a market that you say, that's a deposit for another investment? If I'm playing a 10-year game, that 50 grand leveraged into a 350 grand asset, is that going to give me a better outcome over time?
So there's a time to do renovations, and the secret of being a great property investor is actually understand where that is. But we're talking doing it in a state. I think we've covered off pretty well this whole concept about how do you make sure you don't get rip off. When we come back from this break, we're going to look at how else you can maximize the outcomes of investing interstate in a moment. Back in a moment.
At Passionate Property Investors, we hear from a lot of infinite learners who love to know more and share more about their property knowledge and investment journey. If this sounds like you and you want to get more education where your eyeballs are, then join us on Facebook at Passionate Property Investors. Videos, ebooks, and learning pathways to get your property cup filled up. Not to mention free education with a tribe who gets it. Join today by searching Passionate Property Investors on Facebook.
Welcome back, everyone. We're chatting interstate renovations, and this sort of stuff we like doing to get our listeners to help cultivate and get us thinking about the type of issues we'll be talking about. So we're answering Chris Graham's question here, and just to reiterate, he's asking us to do a podcast on how to renovate a home when you live in another state and essentially not get ripped off. Some tips and rules of thumbs. It'd be great to hear. Okay, we've spoken about how to get a good tradie. What else? What are the other sort of 3 or 4 tenets to interstate renovation to make sure you maximise it? Now, a point that I picked up from you was use your property manager to help you source trades, but make sure you get independence as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that I would always usually do is if you've got a building and pest inspection before you go unconditional, regardless of what you're buying, a good way to test the quality of what you've done is to try and make sure that you engage that same building and pest inspector after your renovations have been complete to get them to go through, because they have first-hand knowledge. They'll be a licensed builder, and you let them know to say, I want you to go back through, here's the list of things that I got completed. Before I pay my invoices, ideally get them to go in there literally within a day or two after, get them to quality control it, not just a property manager.
So they'll pay for, like, if you pay them again to go and do another
100%.
Check. Well, what's that cost? $400,
well,
$500?
Not necessarily even, because you'll probably get them on a discounted rate because they're not doing a full building and pest. So they've already done the full building and pest on your property, or potentially a building inspection, depending on which state you're in. So they can just go and you can literally say, look, I'll just do it as a half price job. I just want you to go and check these things. I already know what the property condition is. I got these things done. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Are they happy to do that?
100%.
You know what? I must admit, that's probably the best tip I've heard this week when it comes to property investment.
This week, geez.
I've never, I get a lot of good tips, but I've never thought of doing that.
Yeah. And this is independent.
So you actually get, they're a licensed builder. So
who's
you go and
seen the property warts and all before you've done the work.
Yeah.
Same person goes in after you've done the work, and they're independent. So they've got absolutely no incentive to say good, bad, or indifferent other than you pay them.
Well, and also if you're an investor who's building a portfolio out, they're going to want to,
and we're buying hundreds of properties in the same market. We don't want someone to sugarcoat anything, because for us, that gives us opportunity to make sure we're doing everything the right way.
That's a really, really, really good point. Okay, give me one more, because we're going to have to break. We're sort of 25 minutes in on this.
Yeah, look,
interstate renovations. Do you need to visit the property?
Yeah, no. In short, no. But I think if you are one of those people who are going to be perennially unsure of, did you get ripped off? That's probably the one thing that you do have to do, because regardless of whether someone says it's great quality work, they're a licensed builder, they've ticked it off, what you need to then therefore do is make sure that for you to be able to sleep at night, go and see it and just visualize it once. Because if you don't do that, the moment something goes wrong, which will happen regardless of whether it's the best renovation or the worst, it will go wrong at some stage. If it does and you're unsure of it before you've actually completed it, the first thing you'll do is think, should I sell this because I've bought a lemon? And one of the big reasons why people sell prematurely is because they're unsure of what they've bought in the first place. And the statistics always reinforce that if you sell a property within 6.2, 6.3 years of buying it, you make a loss. Percentage of people who sell within that time make a loss. So you need to be sure of it. And if you're one of those people who think, I need to see it, then see it. See it before the renovation and see it after the renovation.
It doesn't cost that much to fly around.
Absolutely not.
Buy a cheap flight with Jetstar or whatever.
Not. Yep. Not today because I think they're on strike.
There they are, aren't they? Yeah. I'd say, and here's a tip, and I'd like your view on it, that one of the keys to investing interstate is to have a positive attitude about it rather than a negative attitude about it. And going back to this question, it's framed as in, by doing this, I'm going to get it wrong or I'm going to get ripped off or whatever, right? And it's probably not the right way to spin it. It should be about, you should be know where the pitfalls are, maybe where the sharks are.
Yep. Be
conscious and aware of that, but don't let that determine or influence your attitude as an investor to not do this.
Correct. Absolutely. And I think that is it. Is that know why you're buying it, know what you're doing, and be confident in the fact that you've made this decision for a reason. And make sure before you put pen to paper on whatever you're buying, you've gone through all that gamut of if spots, maybes, and all the other aspects which might have some sort of indecision on your behalf. Because you're not forced to buy the property, but once you do buy it, it's yours. So make sure before you make that decision, like you said, that indecisiveness or that mindset is shifted to being confident and positive about why you bought that property in the first place.
So over at Pure Property Investment, like this is part of what you do. Not all buyers agents do this. So why do you do it?
And it's the reason why we were awarded Buyer's Agent of the Year this year, I personally believe, is that the quality and the time that it takes for us to make sure that not only are we buying the right property for the correct reason, in the right location, right budget, etc., is that when that does come into the fold of being owned by one of our clients, is that the support from that point onwards is not shirked to the actual buyer. Our job is to support that person for these questions, for future renovations, for reviewing the performance of the property, and everything about that has to be all encompassing. And that's the part that we spend so much time on, not just me, but also our buyers agents team. They know how to read a building and pest back to front. They know what's going to be a problem. They know what it's going to cost. They know how to organise it. They know what things are going to be that are absolute deal breakers that we walk away from. And we rescind contracts all the time. We rescinded 2 contracts this week I can think of on properties we have already secured, gone through all the work on, and we don't get paid until we're unconditional. So I'm more than happy to say, not buying it, that doesn't fit our brief. And once it gets to that point, we're going to stand by it.
Are you happy to chat to people about this? Like if they just want to pick your brain?
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's what I spend majority of my time doing. So people can jump on to purepropertyinvestment.com. They can hit the inquire now button and book in a time in my calendar.
Well, you'll just have a chat with them about how to do
so
this.
they can book in a time whenever they want. And literally I think from January to April, I've opened up the majority of my calendar, and there's probably going to be 4 or 5 slots per day where people can jump in there and lock in half an hour to have a chat about where they're at, what they're thinking about doing, any questions they have about existing properties. I'm happy to go through them all.
Cool. All right. Nice one. So I want you to write a piece for us on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au around this, because I think, just 3 or 4 points around how to renovate interstate most effectively. I think it's a really good point.
Yeah, agreed.
And there's the headline for it. So thanks, mate. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for having me.
Good one. Remember to check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. If you're not yet subscribing to our daily morning newsletter, so the first to know what's going on in property, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Please also these reviews, those reviews on the podcast player, wherever you listen to this right now. Please write in. The team here get a real kick behind it. It's just not me behind the microphone. We've got a big production team that make this podcast as successful as what it is. And it means we can get more people in the community listening to what we're doing. And our objective is to help people be more informed or better informed property investors. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.